This is Maureen Elwood. You're listening to BackCAST Cape Ann. The stories you hear as part of BackCAST Cape Ann's series on the LBGTQ community highlights their contribution, care, and activism. It's a look back at experiences, significant moments, and persistent memories. For this episode in our series on the LBGTQ community, Brian King is my guest. Brian is a singer, songwriter, and performer. He's also the frontman for the neo-cabaret band What Time Is It, Mr. Fox? For 10 years, Brian was the director of Prism LGBT Health, a public health program in the North Shore, and he currently works as a medical case manager at the North Shore Health Project in Gloucester. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're going to talk about you as a gay man and a gay man on Cape Ann. You were born here, and so you have a unique insight into the community. So tell me a little bit about when you were younger and your story about just that discovery.
Well, I grew up in Gloucester, was born here. My mom is from Rockport. My dad's from Lanesville. And I have two older brothers. And we grew up, sort of on the border of central Gloucester, East Gloucester. Went to Veterans Memorial and O'Malley and all of that. When it comes to being gay, I guess I knew that I was different pretty young, and I think my first experience of that was the difference being prominent when I went to school, probably even kindergarten, I think. Definitely by first grade, I had heard the word fag and gay and pointed at me. Mm-hmm. So I knew it was something wrong, but it was something that I was.
Well, it was wrong to other people, but
right.
It certainly wasn't wrong to you, right?
Yeah, but that's exactly. But
Mm-hmm.
at the time, I mean, it's what I internalized.
What was that like, thinking that you were different and thinking that it was a wrong thing because other people were calling you names and bullying you? And
Well, it is awful. Yeah. There's a great... I just want to plug this if you have Netflix and you can watch Hannah Gatsby's Nanette. It's a comedy, one-woman comedy show. Have you seen it?
Yes, I've seen that.
She covers a lot of that, and I agree. And
I do too.
I've watched it with some gay friends recently, and we cried and were like, yes, thank you. So that brought up a lot of memories around that, the shame that you internalize because, it's one thing to be told that your, behavior is wrong, like, don't, steal or don't be mean to this other kid or hit somebody. But then when it's your actual identity, who you are, my mother's going to hate that I said this, but one of my earliest memories of feeling that shame was I love Stevie Nicks, and I'm an avid Stevie Nicks fan, and everyone knows that. And she was a big influence on my music. And as a kid, I wanted to be her. I just listened to her constantly. And I was probably 7 years old, and my mom thought I was too into her, so took away the records. And it wasn't because I was doing anything wrong. I wasn't being punished for like having bad grades or anything like that. That wasn't the reason. It was just because I liked her so much. Mm-hmm. And I remember feeling like this is what feels natural to me.
Right,
I'm
this
excited.
Is my music.
This is my music. Why is it being taken away? Just because I love it. That kind of summed it up. I think she thought, oh, he wants to be a girl too much, so we're going to take away this girl music. I don't know if she understood, and I want to give my parents credit that they grew up in a different time, and there wasn't a lot of information. We didn't have gay-straight alliances. We had doctors telling people like, oh no, you gotta fix that. I think she was afraid that it was true, but I know I can't totally speak for her, but that's, but she was also trying to protect me from further alienation and bullying and all that. But rather than addressing the bullying, it was, why don't we make him change? That would be the easier thing.
When you were really coming into your adolescence and saying to yourself, okay, I'm gay, how do I express myself in a way. What was that like for you? Like, what were you doing at that time that was moving you more into becoming yourself in your own authentic way?
Well, I think, I learned that there were two different worlds. There was the world I had in my neighborhood, in my backyard, and then there was the world at school, and they were completely different. In my backyard, I could kind of be who I wanted with my friends, could enjoy we'd take on roles and pretend. We were different characters. I could be Princess Leia, no one cared. But at school, it was a completely different story. And the teachers at that time, many of them, some who obviously weren't this way, but many of them also didn't have the tools or the understanding, so they would ignore the bullying or they would join in on the bullying. That happened. There was a crossing guard who would join in on the bullying. There was a teacher, unfortunately, that recently passed away that a lot of people admired, and that's one of my most vivid memories is this teacher joining in on the ridicule, I think to maybe impress the more athletic kids in the class. But again, there was no information. There weren't gay-straight alliances. There weren't counselors addressing that this was the norm. We had one teacher that ridiculed a friend of mine in the class, and just, he had sort of an effeminate voice, so she kind of said, "Oh, no, no, no," like just mimicked his voice. And even at that age, I think we were like 12, I knew, like, this shouldn't be happening. But there was no one to tell. So I didn't want to go to school. I pretended to be sick a lot so I could stay home, and I didn't join in drama. I wasn't really active in music in school. It was all outside of school where it was safer to do that.
So when you were younger, when you were in that safe place, what were some people who meant a lot to you, or influential pieces of art or literature or music other than Stevie Nicks?
I can't emphasize enough how important I think mentors are, or they were for me. We are in a different culture and different time. There's a lot more representation in music and movies and TV and athletics. But as a kid, one of the first people I met was a lesbian woman who worked at a local convenience store, and I would just hang out there after school and just chat with her and smoke cigarettes and talk about her girlfriend, and that was hugely important. The big important moment was when I met Garrett Lansing, the poet that passed away a year ago. He had a bookstore called Abraxas, and I went up, just curious, went into the bookstore and bought a biography of Jean Cocteau and one of Anais Nin's diaries. And Garrett rang me up and said, "Oh, I had dinner with Anais once." And my mind just blew apart. Like, who is this person? And what are they doing in Gloucester? And I thought that stuff happens way outside of Gloucester, People like that don't live here. And he was openly gay, and his partner was still alive at that time, and sometimes would be at the bookstore. And
Where was the bookstore?
it was, I'm trying to remember. It was above what was the Rigger, so kind of like above where Jalapenos is now. Yeah, he was the first gay man I met that was really someone I wanted to be like, who had an interesting life, was unapologetic, and seemed happy and totally himself. And that was incredibly important. And then we became friends, and I think that my life would have been very different if I didn't meet him and had that kind of mentor. I think in a lot of ways, we like the gay people to be easy to digest. We like our gay figures in movies and stuff to be, he's sad and we feel bad for him, or he's dying and we feel bad for him.
Like Philadelphia.
Yeah, which I think are important stories to tell, but at the same time, they're not the only story to tell. Because there's often not many models for gay people growing up, or they weren't. Sexuality was kind of figure it out on your own. There's a great writer, Anadea Judith, I think, who's sort of a spiritual writer, and she wrote something about, You know, in a capitalistic society, we take away what's natural and then sell it back to you. So there's that, there's that piece where someone else owns sex and then they sell it back. And then, therefore, they dictate your culture, whether it's, corporations or religion dictate what sex is supposed to look like. So then anything that falls outside that norm is like people are hyper-focused on it because it's taboo. Many people have talked about the focus particularly on men because we live in a patriarchy where the focus is often on male power, and men who are gay are considered less powerful. There are so many cultures where there's, research papers about men defining their masculinity based on not being gay. Like, that is what defines me as masculine, the fact that I'm not gay, that I'm not anything like a woman. It's not that I'm respectful or that I work hard or these aren't what, it's the fact that I'm not like a woman. And it's so pervasive and harmful for straight men as well as gay men and women, obviously. But I really think they're obsessed with it because it's, they feel like someone's giving up power. Me personally, I feel a little bit more gender fluid because I've never been super attached to my gender. I think gender is largely constructed socially. Like if you really look at it and you ask someone, okay, what is being a man outside of biology? Or what is being a woman outside of biology? Like, what is a female trait or a male trait that isn't determined by, your DNA? As a kid, I really admired women, and they were my role models, and female singers, actors, writers. There were some men, but for the most part, I just thought, these are the cool people.
Who were the cool people?
Well, it's so funny because this is the question around, is there a science to this? Because as a young kid, even though they were before my generation, really, I was into Judy Garland, Cher, and Bette Midler. I loved them as a kid and responded to them and saw them on TV, went, that's awesome. And I don't know what it was. I didn't know that they were connected to the gay community, that they had large gay followings. I didn't know any of that. But for some reason, I thought they were pretty cool. So they were some of the ones I originally loved. And then Stevie Nicks. And I think Stevie Nicks was sort of the combination of the Wicked Witch and Dorothy. So she worked for me because I love The Wizard of Oz. So that was she's witchy and she sings and she's pretty. So
and that's it.
Yeah.
She's got it all.
She's got it all, right?
She's
strong, she's vulnerable, and she can, cast spells. But as I grew older, I, realized I don't think I wanted to be a woman. I didn't need to dress like one. I wasn't attached to, I need to wear a dress or anything like that. So I just kind of think puberty happened and it just became me. And maybe internalized the feminine and the masculine, if those things exist.
What is or was your most powerful gay moment?
That's a really good question because I guess every moment is kind of gay because it's one part of who I am. It's maybe one of the earliest ones was just being among community, and that was with the North Shore Health Project. They had a movie night at the Little Art Cinema in Rockport, and it was, I think, a fundraiser. And I was probably 20, and they were showing this fantastic movie. It's still one of my favorite films, Beautiful Thing, and the place was full of gay men. And they were laughing at all the right moments, and they were crying at all the right moments, and we all experienced that film together. And it's a movie about two teenage kids that fall in love, and I had wished it had come out when I was in high school because it would have given me, it would have shown me my own story, what I was experiencing. And but it came out, after high school, but still, it's so powerful. And that was one of the earliest times I remember being in community. I hadn't gone to a gay pride event yet. I hadn't really, I had gay friends at that point, but never in such a big room of people, and maybe some years later, going to the Castro Theater in San Francisco and seeing a film with, 40 times as many gay men in one place was pretty gay. I mean, you can't get gayer than the Castro. I performed at the Stonewall Inn a few times, and that was a proud moment because that's where the gay civil rights movement began. And so standing on that stage and singing, just felt proud to be there and invited to perform. For me, also, being gay or queer and spirituality have always been linked. And I think they were for Garrett, too.
How so?
Well, there are some theories that when you're not really attached to the gender norms, that binary of male, female, black, white, right, wrong, like these kinds of, arbitrary labels, that you're more adaptable, maybe. And then that this in spirituality, there's a lot more gray, and maybe queer people kind of have access to that. I'm really interested in ancient Sumer and Inanna, and who's a goddess. Have you read about her? But she's there in the old poetry. It's it's really the first writing we have. We know it was written by a woman. The first sacred text. The first language by humankind. And in those hymns and poems, they talk about men wearing women's clothes to honor Inanna, women wearing men's clothes to honor Inanna. There was already the sort of gender fluidity attached to spirituality, saying, I think they were, you can only speculate. I can't go back in time and ask them, what did you mean by that? But there it is in their sacred texts, and I find that fascinating. The connection between, gender fluidity and spirituality is very early in mankind. It's not something new. So when people say, "Oh, all these trans people," like, well, this isn't new, folks.
Well, in this present moment, what are some of your hopes for gay civil rights and the progress that the gay community has made and marriage equality, and what are some of your hopes for the future? There's obviously more work to be done.
My feeling is that a lot of the issues that we have to do with just this patriarchal structure of where we have some people's lives are worth more than other people's lives in our societies. Just the fact that we even have that structure, like men are more important than women, or white people are more important than people of color. And whether we in our hearts as individuals can say, I don't believe that, the structures of our society, the system still supports that. And people are experiencing the consequences of that and the discrimination and death from that. And I think more and more people are understanding that LGBTQ rights are a piece of that. But if you have a society in which we believe that some people are worth more than others, that there's even a value scale in human life, I think nothing can ever change until we just look at that in a big way. And then you can see, oh, we're doing that with these people. We're doing that with people who are disabled. We're doing that with people who are older. We're doing that with people who are diseased. Like, how do we address all of it? Because it's all, they're all intersected, because you have someone who's queer, who's of color, who's disabled, who has all of these additional stressors on them. And if we don't see it all, it's really hard to kind of just pull out one thing, like, oh, let's just focus on marriage and we'll get that done. And I do want to acknowledge and respect like GLAAD, which are based in Boston, because they do the hard work of policy change. Because I know that to change society, I always say it's like ask 100 people what movie you want to all see tonight and agree on it. That's how society works, like how do we all agree to move forward? as a society, I hope that people can just kind of see that, when you reduce other people to a stereotype, or you make generalizations about people based on their skin color or their sexuality, it creates war.
So as a final question, what is the power of art to tell the gay story?
I've done a lot of shows where I talk about my story, and did a show a couple years ago called Do You Queer What I Queer, with my friend Johnny Blazes, who's a non-binary queer performance artist and singer, and who's 10 years younger, and we talked about the generational differences, or if that's even a generation, 10 years, but how much change has happened, and just the process of doing that show was really healing for me, and then sharing that story with an audience, and we had a whole bunch of people who agreed with me, or agreed with Johnny, or agreed with both of us, and as we would argue and try to resolve some of these issues. And that was a powerful show. I think a lot of people talked about being in the audience and happy that these things were discussed in a group setting that also included drag and singing and dancing around. But I think storytelling is the most powerful activism at the end of the day. It seems to be that's what moves stuff forward. Someone hears someone they can relate to, and they go, "Oh, I didn't realize that's what was going on. I didn't realize how hard that was. I didn't realize how I contributed to that. I don't want to contribute to that anymore." But I want to contribute to the change. So
it's been a pleasure to talk with you and get to know you a little bit better. So Brian King, a local singer, songwriter, artist, activist, keep doing your great work.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this and putting all this together.
Thanks for being on the podcast, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
BackCAST Cape Ann is a production of 1623 Studios. This show was produced by me, Maureen Aylward, with technical assistance from Becky Tober. Find BackCAST Cape Ann on 1623 Studios Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find all our podcast episodes on 1623studios.org.